Hello and welcome to my lesson on how to paint a watercolour eye. Now I'm going to show you how to draw the entire eye, including the eyebrow, as that's something that a lot of people struggle with. I'm going to be using Saunders Waterford paper. It's 300 grams and quite thick, it's like a card almost. So it's nice and absorbent, and that'll mean that we can do nice washes without it cockling. If you get lighter paper, then often it buckles as you're painting. So you want a nice heavy paper, 300 grams or 140 pounds. I'll be using 3 brushes. These are my brushes. This is the most absorbent one. I really recommend getting something like this. This is they're all De La Rowney, or rather 2 of them are. This is De La Rowney Pointed Wash number 6. It's lovely and absorbent, and it goes to fine point, and it's amazing for doing washes. So I really recommend getting a brush that's like this, similar sort of absorbent, so that you can do washes. I think that's a great idea. Second brush that I use all the time is this Graduate De La Rowney sword brush, which is 1/4 inch, and I don't know whether you can see if I put it up against my door there. You can see it's got an angle. So I use the end for sort of detailed stuff, and I use the flat bit if I want a bit more of a, an aspect like that. I've also got a thin brush, and this I use for doing things like eyebrows and eyelashes. So you can get quite a thin line to this. You can also use a rigger brush if you've got a rigger brush. Rigger brushes are similar to this, but sort of twice as long, quite thin. I usually use literally what I call a hairbrush, because it's like this, but I've chopped out most of the hairs and there's just 1 or 2 left. So literally like a hair brush. Brilliant for doing things like the eyebrows and eyelashes. This one's a nice little kit. It's sort of, you can split it like that, and it protects the end, so if you're travelling with it, brilliant. Other materials that we'll be using today to draw the eye, to start off with, I'll be using just a pencil, normal pencil. I've got a kneadable rubber. Kneadable rubbers are great because you can get them to different positions and things. It's almost like glue tack. The other thing I'll be using is kitchen roll, which is brilliant for all things watercolour related. I often use the kitchen towel to dry my brush and use it then to pick up colour. The paints I'll be using today are St. Petersburg White Nights. This is a set of 36, I believe. Well used, as you can see. St. Petersburg paints are great, they're very vibrant. However, I think they're a bit difficult to get these days, and a little bit more expensive. But use whatever you've got. But don't worry if you don't have the same colours. Don't worry if you don't have the same paintbrushes or the same paper. It's really fine. Work with what you've got. Quality of your materials does make a huge difference. So I would say the paper is the most important thing, and then probably it's a toss up between the brushes and the paints. What really made a difference with my painting is when I got these sort of really absorbent brush. Absorbent brushes help. You do smooth washes. If you try and do a wash with a brush like this, then it'll end up being a little bit streaky. And when I say wash, I mean a background of sort of colour, like this peachy colour behind, that's a wash. Okay, so I think we're ready to make a start. Okay, so we've got our paper, I've got a pencil here. I'm going to be using this 3B. I also have a kneadable rubber, just in case I make any mistakes. Now, I want to do not just the eye itself, but the eyebrow, because that's another area where some people make mistakes. So I think it would be a good idea if we include the eyebrow. Now, if you look at the photo that I've given you, this is a photo by Linda Morb. I think I'm pronouncing her last name right. It's Morbe. She very kindly has put some photos up on unsplash.com, which are copyright free. So if you look at the photo, it's a square photo, or at least the way that I've screenshotted it is. So I want to sort of replicate that. I don't want to draw my eye from here to here, because then I'm not going to be able to get the eyebrow in. So I'm just going to sort of, if I just make a note of what a square would be. It's just chopping off the sides here. So my eye needs to fit into here really. The eyebrow would be up here and sort of gently come down here. And I don't know whether you can see very well what I'm sketching in, because I don't really want you to, like, it's a very, I don't want to go too dark, because I might change that in a minute. I haven't finished drawing. I don't know. I'm just at the process where I'm mapping everything in. So when you're at this stage, use big shapes, go very lightly. I'm holding the pencil quite far back because I'm not at this sort of detail point yet. So at the moment I'm still sort of mapping things out. I can see that the closest bit between the eyebrow and the eyelid is sort of around here, and then it curves down. I'm looking at the shape of not necessarily the eye, that too, but at the moment I'm looking at the shape that is left, the skin between the eyebrow and the eyelid. So where the eyelid goes over here, or I'm going to get this confused a lot, and the eyebrow is over here, it sort of goes in over here. The eye doesn't go all the way out over here. It's not a vertical line. So look at the vertical lines. Look at where things are. Hold your pencil, if that helps, against the photo, against your page, to work out the angles. Now, I am a bit better at doing it if you're a beginner, because I've been doing it for years. But it doesn't mean, it's not an innate talent. It's years of practice and getting used to angles and things. Now, here, it's a bit of a curved shape. And I'm really not going to draw things too, I'm going to go really lightly here. Now what you can see is there's thickness to the eyelid. Her eyelashes don't just come out of an edge. That's coming out of the top thickness of the eyelid. So I'm just going to lightly, because you can't really see. There is no line, it's just a bunch of hairs. So, but for my sake, I'm just going to draw it out a little bit. And what I can do from the inner, this is something I do when I'm drawing portraits anyway, but you need to have a think, like, is her eye going up or down? Is it one of those ones, if they go down, they look quite sad. If they go up, they look quite, happy eyes. She has an eye going up, so between the corner of her eye, inner eye, and outer eye, it goes up. And it doesn't, there's that eyelid over there, and it sort of curves round gently. Look at the shape. One of the things that all people, a lot of beginners go wrong, they just draw what they think that they see, which is often the form of an an almond. So am I happy with that? Before I go any further, I'm going to just look back. Sometimes it might help to take a photo of it so I can really see whether I've got it in the right place. For whatever reason, if you look at a picture through your camera, if you take a picture of it, look at it, then you can see what's wrong with it instantly. The amount of times I've done a commission, taken a picture of it thinking it's all done, and had a look and then noticed that, I don't know, the eye is all off or the ear is all off. So it's a really, really good practice just to do that on a regular basis whilst you're drawing. I feel like I might go down a little bit more. Yeah, I feel like there's more of an arch that she's got. So I might just very lightly use my kneadable eraser and just sort of dab at those colours, with the pencil. These kneadable erasers are very good. They last for ages. This one looks quite dirty, but it's fine, still more than usable. The next thing that will help us work out whether we've got this structure in okay is the iris. So she's got pinky stuff that goes up to there. The white of the eye, I think it's called the sclera. Don't know whether I'm pronouncing that right. And that starts here. And look at the whites. Look at the shape of the sclera. Don't look at the iris. When we do need to look at the iris, we need to know where it goes. So a lot of beginners will draw the entire iris in. Well, you can't see the entire iris. And it comes around about here. Let's say here. So look at this shape. Is that shape right? I think it probably is. I'm happy with that anyway. So that is enough to get started with. I might just tidy up a few of these lines. With watercolour, when you're using watercolour and using pencil, you can't go over the pencil. Or rather, if you use water to go over the pencil, that's it, it stays forever. So try, if you don't want to see the pencil lines when you're done, don't rub them out a little bit. I'm just going to tidy up this line because I think it goes more up like that. And so if that line goes more like up like that, this one I think needs to be a bit tighter to it. So just keep playing around. Don't consider the first line you make, you know, gospel. Don't put a lot of effort in to, you know, just this bit. You know, you're spending a lot of time colouring in. This is all you need. But what I might do is just indicate where the pupil is. She's obviously looking into the light. She's got a really tiny pupil. And it's closer to the top than it is at the bottom. So don't spend a lot of time on one area of the drawing, because you might find that's wrong. So just draw the whole thing. Draw the whole thing basically at the same time, and then when you're happy, work out the detail, and then concentrate on the detail later. Right, so I'm going to start with my watercolouring. Okay, so we've got our eye. Now I want to mix up some skin tones. So I'll move my paper away for a minute so you can see the skin tones that I'm going to mix up. Now, if you've got one of these kits like I do, this is a White Night St. Petersburg kit. Sometimes it can benefit with spraying with a little bit of water first, just to activate the colours. I haven't done that this time, so I'm going to be using some of this. I think this is yellow ochre. I'll give you a list of all of the colours, but you can see, basically, try different colours. Try any yellow. If it looks like this, probably the better. And try any pink, like this one. I might just double test what that looks. No, that's a bit more purple, so I don't want a purpley one. Once you get to know your colours a bit better, you can know immediately what kind of skin tone you're after. Like if you, different skin tones, you know how to make up with the different colours. So that's a good colour. I might mix up a little bit more of that. And it's that sort of, I want it to be a little bit more watery than that because we're doing our first wash. So you can eat, right, this is where it ends up being a bit difficult to teach because it all depends on so much on your materials and what paintbrush you've got. So this is the paintbrush that I'm going to be using. And this holds a lot of water. So if I use this, I'll show you, if I put that there, it could probably suck up all of that colour. No colour left. Sucks it all up. And that's okay, because if I come over here and I'll go over, I'll start over here. What I don't want to end up with is lines, so I can re-dip this in my water and blend it out. And when I see that there's a sharp line, an edge, I'll make sure that there isn't. I'll make sure that I catch that. I say catch that. Make sure you get it before it dries. That's what I mean to say. Now you can go over the eye a bit actually. I think maybe I'll go over the top bit because you can see the whitest bit of the eye is over here. This bit's fine. It's also lighter. So, go over it everywhere with your colour. Maybe we can just have an interesting edge. Don't go over where you've already gone, otherwise you'll start picking up colour where you're trying to lay down colour. Do you see what I mean? So be very careful, like there when I did there, just like daub a little colour. It's dangerous to do that. So really I would say one of the key things that beginners make mistakes with is just trying to go over it and fix things. You just got to make your peace with watercolour. When you've gone over it and it's not quite right, make your peace with it and then you can fix it maybe later, and I'll show you how. But what we're after is basically what I've got here, which is a clean wash. You can see there's a little bit more colour on this side. I'm okay with that. If I didn't want that there, let's say, so I'm going to dip my paintbrush in some clean water and dry it out. If I didn't want that there, I can swoop in like this. So this is when you can fix problems with your watercolour. You can, I can't remember what other terms people use. I sort of pick off the colour or pull off the colour. And so if you've gone over it all over with a wash, but you want to have some areas that highlights, you can do this before it dries. It's the best time to do it before it dries. If you want something darker, right, so what we'll do now, so we've got our plain wash. I'm just going to mix up another little bit of the same two colours that I used before. And where there's shading, you could even use this bit just to double check the colour that you're going to be applying. There's a little bit of shaded area over here, and can you see, because the paper's wet, it's much lighter than it is over here because the paper's wet. Yeah, so maybe that's a bit too red for me. I don't really mind too much. But there's another bit of colour right underneath, underneath the eye. There's a bit of a pinkier colour because there's thickness there as well. You can almost see, you can see the thickness under the eye here. Where it's bled here, I don't mind too much. I can pick that off. I'm in danger of messing up the base layer, but at the moment I can pick that off. I might apply a little bit of tone to this bit here. So this is the same, sort of a pinkier mix. Same two colours I've used, but this is just a slightly pinkier mix. So the other way of doing this is just waiting until it's dry, and then what you'll get is hard edges. What we're doing by applying the paint now, we're getting soft edges. So maybe I'll carry on just adding an extra little bit here for the crease. That's I'd like to smooth this out a bit, so I've just cleaned my brush, dried it a little bit, and I'll just smooth that. You see? This brush that I'm using is really good for, I can use the flat side of it to get wider areas and the pointed end to get quite detailed areas. Really do like this brush. Right, what I'll do is I'll dry this and I'll show you how to put on the next layer. Okay, so that's dry. Now if you look at this eye, can you see that this area over here is lighter than this bit over here? This bit over here is lighter than this bit over here. So she's got the light coming from this side. So we need to gradually create some shading over here and fade it out over here where we've actually pulled off the colour, because that's the colour that we wanted to stay with. But we do want it darker over here. We need a bit of a darkness under her eye. So I'm going to, this time around, wet the paper first. So when we applied the paint the first time around, if you're using a brush like this that's really absorbent and it creates a watery mix, then you can get away without watering, putting a coat of water down first. If you're using a brush, and I would, as much as I love this brush, I would never say to do a painting this size and cover this background. You really, to get anything looking good, you have to use a bigger brush. Try and use an absorbent brush, something. I really like these round brushes. A lot of people buy those flat brushes. I don't get on with them. I don't find them as absorbent. It could just be that I've not found the right one for me. But if you're doing a large area, really try and make sure that you're using a good absorbent brush. Absorbent brushes are great for washes, but very difficult to control for other things. So once you get a little bit better, you can use these absorbent brushes for doing more detailed work. But otherwise, this for doing the washes, and then something like this for doing the detailed stuff. So as I said, this time around I'm just going to wet the paper just to show you the different options. I'm going to go over the eyebrow as well, and I'll go down here. So sometimes it's difficult to see where you're going because you have to tilt your head so you can see the sheen of the paper. So I've got the same mix I was using before, like the slightly darker mix. I'm not going to, I don't think I'm going to add any more colours to it at the moment. I'm just going to add it here. I'll put it all over the eyebrow here because the skin is darker under the eyebrow. And if I go over the eyelid a little bit, that's okay. Right, and the skin, it does carry on getting, it's still darkish over here, and then it's dark over here. Bear in mind the line that you've left over here, I can leave that for another few seconds or so, because I know that it was done with a wet brush and I can still pick it up. A lot of this is still, it's very much trial and error with the materials that you've got. So before that dries into a strange shape, I'm going to use a clean damp brush. Just make sure that it's sort of blended out, and I'm going to follow that the curve of the eye around. And same thing over here. It's a little bit lighter over here, so I picked off a little bit of the colour there. And maybe I'll, because it creates that creates a little bit of a line, a curve over here. Whilst that's drying, I could add in a little bit more colour over here. So again, it's the same mix, but now I'm applying it with the detail brush. And you can you see that it's bleeding out a little bit up? I mean, you can almost angle your paper so that it just puts the colour slightly up. And maybe now I might introduce something like I think this is I think that's a burnt sienna So mix it up a little, just add a tiny little bit. Can you see the consistency of that colour there? So it's just turned it a little bit more browny. I'd recommend going, like, not using too much brown in terms of shadows, because brown can sort of deaden skin tones. And it's probably, whilst this is still quite wet and I'm applying colour, like you see I'm daubing colour on, that's okay. If I smoothed it on, if I went like this and I smoothed that colour on with my brush, it would pick up colour rather than put the colour down. Just going to tidy that up. When you're doing this watercolour painting, it helps to, you sort of end up jumping around a bit on your painting, waiting for something to dry. So you'll wait for the eyebrow to dry, so you'll work on the, right, for example, now we can work on the iris. So I'll wait for everything else to dry, and then I'll work on the iris. What I don't want to do is touch any of this pink that I've just applied, because I know that will be bad. So now what I want to do is find the lightest colour in her eye, which is maybe like sort of yellow. Let's try this yellow. Now I'm not being too prescriptive about the colours that you're using, because I know that you'll have a different kit to me. So I don't want to say use, you know, cadmium yellow. In fact, you probably will have a cadmium yellow. Most of them do. So I think what I'm going to do is use this one. And at the moment, let's see. I think right, so I've got my yellow just here. You can use your colour directly out of the pan itself. These are called pans rather than tubes. You can get watercolours in tubes or pans, so you can get your colour directly out of the pan and it's more concentrated. But if you want to sort of see what you're getting a little more, then you can use the eye. You can use the palette. So I'm going over everywhere at the moment, I think. Yeah, I'm going to go over it everywhere with that colour. Maybe not the pupil. There's no reason why not. But no, when I say that, I'm going to go over just the inner bit. So that I'm going to just pull off where I did that. This is a good example of how to fix a mistake then. So I don't want that yellow to be there. I've got a clean brush that I've dried off, and I'm going to try and put a little bit of pressure on that and do in one smooth stroke, pull off the colour. Pull off. When you're pulling colour off, don't do it as though you're painting. Sort of put quite a lot of pressure on. I'm going to pull it off over here as well. So some colours you can do this with quite easily, other colours you can't, like blacks you really struggle, like a lamp black. I've never been able to successfully pull things off with. But now whilst this is still wet, I could just get a one of the nice blues. So let me just see what we've got. We've got different, I think I'll use some of this cerulean blue. I think I'll use some of this. This is a turquoise. Probably won't use any turquoise. Could use some of this sort of colour. Could use some of this colour. You can obviously mix your blues. If you haven't got this range of blues, doesn't matter. So I think I'm going to use some of this colour here, and maybe a bit of the cerulean blue. So I'll start off with doing a little bit of this colour around the edges. So I'm using the pointed end of this sword brush now. If you haven't got a sword brush, use something else. Another detailed sort of brush. I'm just applying lightly at the moment. So I'm trying to go in irises, all of the sort of colours go in, and there is a bit of a light patch there, so what we can try and do is preserve the lights. Eyes are always darker under the lid because it's casting a shadow. Usually light's coming from above, so it casts a shadow on the eye. So just going around all quite lightly. I'd like that to be darker around the outside, so I might mix it with, see, I've got some of this indigo sort of colour here. So I might mix it a little bit with that and just sort of dab it around the outside. So try not to get, I started off with this bit of a line around the outside, but it needs to be a bit more blurry than that to make it look like an eye and less like a circle that you've drawn. So make sure that you've got the line sort of blurred out enough. And I might add a bit of, she's got some lovely golden bits of her eye, so let's see what colours I could use for that. This is raw umber. That might create quite a nice gold, and I might mix some of it with that yellow. So yeah. There we go. So at this point, look, I'm looking more at the photo than I am at what I'm drawing almost. I really want to try and represent what I'm drawing. So yeah. I've got the lighter cerulean blue now, just to dot in some lines going in. Still like it to be a bit dark around here, so again I might add in some of that darker, I think it's called indigo, on my list. And it is quite a lot darker over here. Can you see where it was wet, it bleeds really nicely. It's one of the nicest things about watercolours, is if you daub a colour in to a wet painting, it creates this really lovely effect. Okay, well we'll leave that for the time being. Now I'm going to wait for that to dry. But now this is dried. So what I might do is start strengthening up the colours around this bit of her eye. So I'm going to go back to the colours that we used before, which is the yellow ochre and this, I think it's called permanent rose. And I've got this blue over here. What I might do is put some of that blue over here and see what that looks like on the paper. Can you see it sort of creates a bit of a sort of a purpley, so sometimes it's really nice to mix the colours that you've used already as part of your picture, mix them to create a colour, sort of creates a nice harmony. Now, in fact, I'm just going to do the whole of the whites of her eye. One of the things that people make a mistake with when they're again, learning is they never paint the whites of the eye, where the whites of the eye are hardly ever white. So, right, what I've just done there, so I've applied a little bit of paint. I want to smooth that out now. So I've got a damp brush. I'm going to pull that colour towards the eye. Can you see it softens that up nicely? So now it's all wet. If I wanted to have it darker here, I can still add a little bit of that colour here. There is a hard line down here. So when I say hard line, it's almost like a line that you could have drawn with a ruler. It's a hard line between a colour and another colour. So here there's a hard line of sort of almost like a dark colour, almost like a black, and then the skin tone. Here, around here is all soft tones, soft skin tones. So, and she's got quite a lot of shading at the top. This is where I was saying she's got a thickness to her eye. I've just applied a little bit more of that blue and with that skin tone mix. Now, whatever you do this time, you don't want to blur too much, although because the eye it's a soft. That's a soft line. So what I could do is just blur it a little bit. I don't want to blur it so that the eye that's wet spills into this side, but I do want the edges to be blurred just a little bit. Whilst I'm doing this white of the eye, I might carry on a bit on this side, although it's not anywhere near as shaded, so I'm going to use a slightly pinkier mix. This is the pinkier mix. Like, you can barely see it. I'm just building up colours, building up layers, but be as subtle as you can when you're learning as well. Be as subtle as you can, because you might find that it's easier to build up colours. It's harder to take colours away. So I'm going to leave a little bit of white over here because it is quite white. I think that's enough for now. Whilst this is still a little bit wet, a little bit damp, maybe I'll add a little bit more definition here. So it needs to be a bit, maybe I've already got my skin tone there. I'm going to put more of that blue colour there. And then I've got that there, and I can sort of mix the two on the palette. Can you see what I'm doing? So I'm not applying that colour to that because it will taint the whole thing. I'm just drawing colour from each bit. Sorry if you can all hear the motorbikes. For whatever reason, there seems to be like a motorbike convention on the seafront today. And I'm going to apply that here, and you can see it's not creating a hard line, and that is because it's still a bit wet, so that's perfect. That's exactly the consistency that I wanted. You might find that things need to be, maybe you're a bit slower applying the paint, so you might need to wet that area first and then apply the paint. Just smoothing. Can you see the blue is bled here? If you want to fix that, I mean, I don't mind it, but use a clean damp brush and pick off the colour. Blue is another one of those colours that might be a little bit difficult to pull colour off. But I think whilst we are, maybe what I'll do is I'll outline as much as I'll use a bit more of this pinky colour. Yeah, and I'm going to do the pink lid, the inner lid. So she's got hairs under her eye, but they don't come out of her eye. A lot of people, when they're learning how to draw, they start drawing the lid as though, or the eyelashes as though they're coming straight out of the eye. And they don't do that. And I might actually darken this area as well. You can see it's not as light as I had it. And that'll give a little bit of extra oomph to the eyelashes when I draw them in. and still needs to be a little bit pinkier down here. So maybe what I might do is, I was using that permanent rose. What I might do is use a bit more of a reddy colour, sort of just mix that in with things. So that colour is you see it's a little bit more red. But if I mix that in with some of the colour that I've got already, it'll just create a slightly reddier mix, which I can put in the corner of her eye here. So play with the colours, test them out over here. I might add a bit of that over here as well. She looks a bit spooky without her pupil in. I think that's dried, so I'm going to add in her pupil. I tend not to use black. I've got, let's see what I've got. That's Payne's Grey. I'm going to use this colour here that I've got. Use the darkest blacky looking colour that you got. But be aware, Payne's Grey, I quite like Payne's Grey. It's a sort of a dark blue. Black is a colour that doesn't exist too much in nature. So I tend not to use it too much. I do mix black with other colours. So there we go. Some of that black, if you want to get it even blacker, so I've got it all wet, it's quite a wet area, you can just dab colour into that now, and that will really stand out. And I'm going to just apply a few little, the dark over here as well, so I don't want that to dry. I definitely don't want it to dry like that. And before it dries, I'm going to use a clean damp brush just to pull that, like merge that line, so it just adds a little extra depth because of the shading at the top of the eye. And maybe I'll do some over here. Still a bit wet over here, so a bit of a dangerous game. Bit of a dangerous game. Now I've got that sort of quite dark, the dark colour. I add another little bit of red. We need to get that quite a lot darker. The beauty, or one of the things that, just adding a little bit of that red there. One of the things that can make your artwork really stand out is by getting some really lovely contrast. So where things are dark, really paint them dark. Don't be shy. Is this dry over here yet? Because we do need to get a little bit of a hard line over here. As things are drying, you can see hard lines and soft lines and things that maybe you've made a mistake with. So I can see that there's a line here on the sclera that's a bit too much of a hard line. I want it to be blurred out, so I've got my clean damp brush. I'm just going to sort of stroke it away, trying not to touch the iris because that might still be wet and I don't want it to bleed in. Whilst we've got the black going, what I might do is use the dark Payne's Grey just to go over her eyelid, just that crease. She's got another bit of, sort of goes down like that. Often we have this sort of bit of hangy skin that goes over that way. It's less noticeable in younger people, but in older people, the more eyes you draw, the more you'll notice that people have more of a hangy flap over their eyes. It's a bit hard there. What I might do is use a slightly different skin tone, mix the skin tone up again, just blur that, stroke it down. Caress the paper, don't scratch or scrub the paper ever. Or people paint like they're scrubbing a wall. I'm still looking a bit odd at the moment because I haven't got the eyelashes in or the eyebrow. I'm just going to have a think. Do I want any more shading? I think I would still like more shading over here. I'd like more shading over here under her eye. I think at the moment I might start doing the eyebrow. So I'll get a light-ish colour. So always when you're working with watercolours, work from light to brown. Light to brown, light to dark. I think that's probably a little bit too light. See, I'm sort of mixing the colours up as I go. I'm not too. You know, see if there's. You know, you might whilst you're mixing up think that no, that colour needs to be more sort of red or whatever. It's quite fun to mix. I'm going to use this sort of a mix here. And at the moment, I might sort of cover most of the eyebrows. So I'm going to follow, so my top tip for eyebrows, follow the direction of the hairs. It really, really helps. Now at the moment I'm not wanting to draw the individual hairs, I'm just sort of wanting to give a bit of an impression of the hairs. And so I'm following the direction. When eyebrows get to this point over here, so I can move my water pot so you can see better, the hairs come from above. She's got light, because the light's coming from over here, it is lighter. I'm not going to do any of the individual hairs at the moment, I'm just wanting to give a little bit of a background. This is a background for the hairs basically. Now, I think that's dry over here, so I'm going to just strengthen up the tones around the eye so that it's darker over here. And I'm going to do that with maybe some of, I've got some of this sort of red, and maybe I'll use a little bit of that yellow that we had before. So I'm going to go back to using my big brush because I want to apply a lot of colour. I'm going to apply it straight on. Because if you put water down first, it's quite nice to smooth things out. However, I'm always going to go up to the eyebrow. It's still wet, so it could bleed in. It's not going to be the end of the world. I don't want it to dry like that. I don't want that edge there, but whilst I've got my painted brush, I'm just going to carry on around here as well. And now I'm going to save that line with a clean damp brush and just sort of stroke it in so that it dries in a graduated fashion. Graduated. Really struggle with that term. One of them is graduated, one of them is gradiated. I think it's graduated. Okay. So, whilst I think maybe, you see when I'm just trying to see if things are dried, I'm angling my head so I can see an angle if there's a bit of a sheen. Sometimes there's not, sometimes I'm not sure, so I have to double check and just do a bit of a, but I think this is largely dry. You can get different different levels of dryness. And some you think, oh, that'll be good. It won't create a completely hard line, but it'll create a hard line enough to be able to you know, do a bit more painting. I would like more of a hard line here, but I know that I can't apply that yet because there's this sheen of the paper. I know it's still wet, so I know that it will bleed. I know that the eyebrow is still wet, so I think at the moment I've done as much as I can. What I'm going to do now is dry it and then come back. Okay, I think what I might start doing is doing some of the hairs. So let's test. The eyelashes are a little bit complicated. Well, not complicated, but they require a little bit of fine detail work. So I'm going to get some dark for the eyebrows, some brown. Let's use that tone for now, and we'll just do a few practiced attempts at doing some eyelashes. So I've got the thinnest brush I've got. I usually have, I've got what I call a hairbrush, but I can't find it unfortunately. The hairbrush is a brush a bit like this that I've chopped out most of the hairs with, and I've just got one or two, so it's like literally a hairbrush. I'm just going to quickly sort of just try and get some a bit thick. That was better. So practice getting really sort of thin lines, and then once you feel like you can get a few thin lines, let's just try it with the eyebrow. So again, follow the direction of the hairs. If you see that they're going a bit flatter over here, then do them flatter. Try and flick with hairs. They sort of benefit from a little bit of sort of flicking, and like bear in mind the length of the hair as well. Don't just like do one that goes all the way down here, because no one has hairs that long. And again, we're going a bit lighter over here because that's where the light's coming from. She's got some rogue hairs here, but I might do them a little bit bit darker. What we can do, whilst that's still sort of drying, we could almost add in a little bit of a darker brown. So you can, instead of using this to pick up colour, this little paintbrush, when I'm putting things on my palette, I'm using my not huge wash brush, but my less huge brush here, and that's with the idea that just trying to get like a slightly darker brown. I think that's a bit, I don't like that brown. I've never liked that brown. Got sort of darker brown. I mixed a bit of black and a little bit of brown. I can't remember what I was saying. Anyway, right, yeah. It's like it will blend in a little bit. It'll merge with other hairs at this point, but it's okay. I've got some hairs coming from the bottom, hairs from top. So yes, really try and sort of flick very lightly. You can also get things called a rigger brush. A lot of people use rigger brushes. Rigger brushes are like this, but with a longer, probably about almost 2 centimeters, I would say, of hair, and it helps you do that flick really well. But also it can be quite difficult to control for beginners, or for people that are used to it. I find it quite difficult to control. So I tend to use, that's why I created my hair brush. I'll have to make another one. I think I'm going to leave that there for the time. Actually, maybe I'll do that. I can see there's hairs about here, just like little ones, and they curve up a bit. It's good to see a woman with her eyebrows like this. They're a little bit, you know, they're just natural. Quite like that. Whilst I've got this little brush, I'm going to get my sort of a Payne's Grey dark colour, which is this sort of colour, and just go over some of the bits I feel like needs a little bit more definition. So I feel like the crease needs a bit more definition. And I feel like it could do with a little bit darker. Sometimes I have got two brushes in my hand, so I might be applying paint with this one and with the other one sort of blending it out because I don't want it to dry like it is. So sometimes, you know, it's double painting. Right, now I might add again with the Payne's Grey just a little bit more depth here. I don't want it to dry in a line, so I'm blending it out with my other paintbrush. And she could do with a little bit of definition over here as well. In fact, she's got a little bit of a line all the way around. Generally, I tell people do not draw lines because they don't really exist. You don't get people having lots of lines for their eyes, but with this woman, she does have a bit. Okay, what I would like to just do now is just do another, make that inner eyelid line a little bit clearer, but I don't want to do that quite yet. Maybe I can get away with it because we've got, you know, I've just done that other line, so it might not. That's darker than I wanted as well. So what I'm going to use my other brush. It's a bit thicker. Stroke it from there and pull the colour down. Keep sort of stroking it. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I can see that I would like a bit more highlight over there, so I'm just going to try and pick up a little bit of colour. That's with my clean damp brush. And I think what I might do now is just dry it a little bit and then we can start doing the eyelashes. I think what I might do is just, I feel like we could strengthen up some of the tones in her eye, just make them a little bit prettier. So I'll try and find a more of a sort of a goldeny brown. I've got this goldeny, or this sort of brown that's a little bit more browny, and I might just sort of dot them in a little bit over here. She's got actually quite a ring around her. Let's do that. Let's do sort of almost like a ring around her pupil for the most part, which we'll just pull out with a clean damp brush. I think that gives her eye a little bit more depth. Actually, it's quite nice. And she could probably do with a bit more definition over here as well. So just keep. There is such a thing as overworking with watercolours, and you don't want to do that, but likewise you want to be happy with it as well. So eyes are so lovely to paint. With watercolour you often have to build up colour, spend a lot of time building up colour, because it does soak into the paper. The paper that I've got is Saunders Waterford, and it does seem to soak up colours, so it sort of almost deadens them a little bit. I'm not in love with this paper. Right, whilst this is, whilst the iris is drying, I might just go back, add a few darker hairs on my eyebrow. It's funny when you do eyes this close up, sometimes I find it difficult to see which way the eye goes. Obviously it will help when we've got the when we have the eyelashes in. So once I've got that sort of bit of brown, I might just stroke it down here. So it's a bit of a brownier colour. I just want to make that crease a little bit more obvious. I don't want it to have a line too much, so I'm just going to use my other paintbrush and blend it out. You can see it's all a case of just fiddling around, blending things out, making sure you're happy with things. Okay, she's got quite it's got quite a shady bit here. You learn all these sort of tricks of the trade to make things look a bit 3D, and one of them is to, you know, add a little bit of a dark bit here, add a little bit more of a dark bit over here. Okay, I'm going to dry this and then we're going to try eyelashes. Okay, eyelashes then. Let's just do it on a test piece over here. So we want to make sure that our eyelashes, that we follow the direction of where they're going in the photo. So, you know, if they're straight in front of you, we want to sort of try and start at the base as well, and they curve up and they go up. Curve up and go up. And they're quite messy. So let's try that. Over on the right hand side we'll go like that. So try and do your flicks. You need quite a damp brush, not too much, but you don't want it going running out of paint towards the end of your brush stroke. So we'll try it this way. We've got right. So also bear in mind the eyelashes, they're not starting on this line, they're starting above. I'm going to start over this side. Actually, what I might do is just turn my paper slightly so that I can do things a bit better. So I can see that what I might do is turn my photo up that way as well, just so I can sort of represent it better. So I've got that one, goes like that, that. That was a bit thick. And then they start coming this way. Some of them go over up to the crease and a bit beyond some of them. Go down and up, down and up, down and up, down and up, down and up. Closer to the side of the eye, that further out they get like that. Down and up, down and up, down and up. This is easier with my hairbrush. Around when it gets to this point, it come out all the way like that. Oh, that's nice. Yeah, sometimes you can sort of find your way a bit better. You get into your rhythm, your groove. Okay, let's have a look. Let's turn my photo up the right way. Okay, I'm happy with that. I might then do these down here. So again, they're not coming out of the eyebrow, the eye line. They're coming from below. So they're a bit thick. Try and dab them before they dry. That one's a bit thick too. Let's practice again over here. Yeah, it's better. You can follow the eyes. You don't want to religiously be drawing every single eyelash in that you can see. Life's too short for that. But you also don't want to be, you want it to represent what's there. Okay. So I would like it to be a bit darker at the base of these eyelashes. So I'm just going to mix up a bit of a dark brown and just sort of dots maybe, because whilst it's still a bit wet, I might be able to dot some in. It's not worked out very well. Right, I'm going to go back, and open up my photo again. Just do a few dark eyelashes rather. Okay. Try and follow the direction of the hair. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's easier, sort of position of your hand wise, to have the hair, you know, go from the top of the hair to the bottom. But I've never found it looks as natural if you do it that way. Okay, I might then have some of these little rogue hairs going off here. A few more hairs, just following the direction. So now what we want to do is really sort of match the darks. So the darkest thing on our photo is her eyelashes and the pupil. Is that the darkest thing on our painting? Yes. I'm just going to strengthen up actually this dark. The stronger darker your darks are, the more I think it brings your painting alive. What else is there to change? So you can even at this point show it to your friend to compare your picture against the photo. See if there's anything that you could, you know, that's not quite right. Is her eye a bit too open? Is it, you know, I think that maybe she could do with a little bit more shading at the top here. So I've got a bit of watered down Payne's grey. So I use a lot of watery mixes. Okay. And I think that'll be fine. Now if we want to add, she has got some really light highlights in her eye. Now you can use, it depends, if you're a die-hard watercolourist, then you wouldn't be using any other mediums. And generally watercolour palettes come with white, but but I don't know many watercolourists that use the white. I tend to use this jelly roll pen, and it's quite good for doing, I'll show you on a bit over there, so it just creates a bit of a line of white. My jelly pen needs to be a little bit renewed. Sometimes it goes on some surfaces better than others. The other thing you can do is use white gouache. I've got some on my palette that could be like revived a little bit. I always keep it in, I keep a spot of white gouache in the corner of my palette, generally. And white gouache is more opaque than watercolour. And it's not, I'll show you over here, I'll try it over here. You can see it sort of has the same sort of effect. I find it a little bit, it's probably a bit more reliable than my jelly roll pen. and it can create just a few little highlights. Maybe we'll put a little bit of a highlight over here and in this bit. She could probably do with a bit of a highlight over here. I think she, now just seen, I think that she could have a bit of shading on this side a bit more. I used a bit more of a pinky colour for that one. Generally, can you see my palette? So I kind of got a mix of everything, and sometimes I just use, I think, all right, well, I could do with a bit of shading. I'll just mix this, whatever I had colours here. It's generally, if you're using the colours that you've already incorporated in your painting, generally they'll work all right. Anyway, I'm happy with that. I would love to see your eyes if you want to show me yours. Then please do tag me in Instagram. Yeah, take a picture, tag me in Instagram, and I'll have a look and comment and give you some feedback. It's really good to get feedback from people. It's one of the most helpful things that you can do is to get feedback from people on your artwork. And I know it's really scary, but it will help you improve by leaps and bounds. So just, I keep looking at it and thinking of different things to add. So just a few little darker bits around her eye. Yeah, okay. Right, done. Okay, well, I hope that went well. I'm really keen to see your eyes. So if you'd like to show me, then please feel free to put them up on Instagram and tag me at Sue Cooper Artist. If you've got any ideas for future lessons, then please let me know and I will upload them. I'm also thinking about doing a portraiture course, so hopefully I'll get that up and running soon. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks for joining me.